Hi, my name is Patino, and I am going to share my analysis of task 12 C. And so I'm going to be reading from my phone, so if I'm looking down, please excuse me. So here for the ELP2 assessments, I understand that the effect size is at 1.048029, and that is a large amount of student learning, um, demonstrating the students' progress in their scores. I think that overall the student learning um, was a small significant from the post-test and the pre-test when I'm looking at the standard deviation, which was 0.763. Um, and so I believe that more than 50% of the sample size was positively affected from the lesson objective that was collected through the assessment of the students' learning. Um, I believe that the standard deviation of this ELP2 assessment was below the effect size. And I also think that because of the size of the sample, there were only 10 students. Well, I only have 10 students. So that is showing a difference in the student progress when I'm looking at this data, right? Um, Next, the ELP3 assessment. So the effect size for this data set demonstrated a large amount of learning with the effect size of 1.854105, which is greater than zero point 0.8 on Cohen's d. And the standard deviation for this assessment data was 0.566 plus. So I believe that the students' learning showed adequate growth based on the average standard deviation from both sets of data points from the lessons. And the raw score shows that there's 50% of the sample that were positively affected by the instructional objectives. The ELP3 um, standard deviation was also below the effect size, so shows small small difference there. And now looking at the ELP9 assessments. So for this task, the student's assessment had an effect size of 0.498514. And this effect size tells me that the students had moderate amount of learning from the lessons based on the Cohen's d. The overall student deviation was 0.787340376, and I believe that the students show adequate growth despite one student's non-participation in the post-test data. So that is affecting my overall standard deviation as well as my data point itself. The ELP9 also has a standard deviation that was above the effect size. So that was the only one that was above. But like I said, the number of students in my set sample might have affected that. So that's one of my reflections. Also looking to the ELP2, the students, I guess based on what the task was, the students didn't show that much growth, or say movement in their learning or from my instruction. And I'm thinking about, could it have been the language that they were still grappling with as English language learners, and maybe they needed more time with those skills um, than I had originally given, because most of the lessons I extended from 1 week to 2 weeks. So maybe more than 10 days in certain circumstances, because some students were absent. So I had to extend a little bit or give that one to one, which gives a different flair to how the students respond, because then they're not really listening to their peers. And then the other students might be just repeating what they've already known, and so then that might skew their interpretation or of the data, or how much they were able to remember and retain in that information, or maybe not. So overall, I do think that the students demonstrated their new knowledge on all of the post test. I've been looking for hours and days upon hours at trying to explain how to describe the students' progress. So even if the students did just a little bit, as my data here is showing me that the students, for the most part, did substantially grow. So there were moderate and large gains based on their effect size, right? Because it was more than the mean of the population. But I think that because the population's set was just 10, then it gives me something to look at differently for a next step in data collection. And so that is my description of the data, and I hope that I was able to explain what I understood. One thing that I do want to say, for the ELP 3, the students demonstrated the highest amount of understanding, but as I look here, I have the standard deviation that is below the effect size. So I am going to continue to look a little bit more deeply and try to understand how that actually is affecting the kinds of instruction that I give, because I understand that this is the whole purpose, right? So that we can evaluate what we've done and make modifications and changes so that we can support the students' learning. And so I think that overall, the data shows that the students did show growth. If I'm looking at the mean score from my previous work, the students did go up from post-test means, from the pre-test means to the post-test means, but the effect size and the standard deviation that both of these calculated seemed to just be a little bit different. So I'm still learning. If this is not correct, then I will continue digging into this. But I think that I understand that these standard deviation for the two, um, the pre and the post test, are the ones that actually give me that standard deviation average, and that based on the effect size, I'm going to be able to interpret what amount, small, moderate, or large, affect my instruction provided to my students in these three different assessments. So, there you have it. Thank you.